I love when things feel activated. Like there's something about it that's out of control and you don't know what it is necessarily, but it's not super contained and tight. Tony would always like knock me down with this. He'd be like, great mix, bro. Really tight. Like, what's going to jump out at you? What's going to captivate you here? What's going to draw your attention here? And when I heard Graham's mixes, that's what I was noticing. I was like, oh shit, that synth is crazy on the left. Like, whoa, what's happening? Like, that's what makes you feel good. When I take a rough mix and do my thing to it, it's loosening that shit up. It's bringing that energy and that forward motion and these moments, in a way trying to unmix the record. Well, hello.
Sliding into home.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I read on one of the comments from the survey that we're some of the world's best engineers, and I think we might have disproved that tonight. I think
that was my favorite part.
Yeah,
I was like, oh, thank you.
Yeah, it
means a lot to me.
Very kind of someone to say, but maybe like chefs, you're better with one than having four in the kitchen.
Was this in regards to our work as engineers or our work on the podcast as engineers?
It was no, it was our work as engineers. Someone was being very kind and was flattering our collective abilities.
Oh, so it's some of the best engineers on the planet, I think, or something like that.
Yeah,
world on Earth.
Of the whole universe.
And I was like, I would say that I am the best.
Yeah, you owned it. You were very comfortable with it. I was a little less comfortable, but. So Michael is on the road this week for people who are listening live, and it's our first week with Michael on his road trip. So we were just getting wired in with the remote setup again, the Zoom setup, which took us a minute. So Michael, you're in San Diego you're still in LA, really? You're kind of in Huntington Beach or something?
OC,
yeah. Mm-hmm. And then tomorrow you head to San Diego for really the start of your trip proper?
Yeah, as long as I'm feeling good.
Yeah.
Got the vaccine, the second dose today. So as long as I'm feeling good,
you're going to do it?
Yeah, tomorrow's the day.
Nice.
Oh, damn, that shit might hit you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely planning to not go down tomorrow.
Yeah.
But if I can, the apartment is ready, so.
Congrats on your vax.
Either way. Congrats on the vax.
Congrats on the vax.
I just saw a post on Instagram and I posted it to my story and I thought it was kind of cool. Charles Kenny, at Charles J. Kenny on Twitter, said, I just got vaccinated by a woman born in Vietnam with a vaccine created by 2 Turkish refugees living in Germany and manufactured by a U.S. company run by a Greek migrant. Thank you, world.
Nice.
Indeed.
I was like, whoa.
That's a cool sentiment, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll sign up to that.
And what did you guys do this life?
Yeah. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I made a bunch of records louder. And it's the small differences that really, who wants to be reaching for the knob on the car stereo? It's like, I got you. Mm-hmm. I turned it up for you. It's got to come down the radio really loud and out your iPod really loud or whatever, it's good. AirPods, whatever. That's my contribution to humanity. and I'm raising a couple of daughters that are going to obviously change the world. So I'm banking on them. It's sort of a second order effect. That's what I'm hoping for.
I think you can. I think that's a fair bet.
Yeah. Yeah.
A wise bet, sorry.
Yeah.
I defer all world changing to them.
You're investing in them with
yeah, I'm trying to keep things the same for them so that they can change it.
You're doing a layup. You're doing a world change layup.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep it the same so you get more years learning it and then change it.
And a bigger effect, like climate change. I'm gonna crank it up so that when you guys fix it, it's gonna be.
We should work on the introduction now. So Ellie's first internship or job somewhere is for Zev Weinstein. We should get her in the office of Zev.
Man,
Yeah, the 9-year-old assisting the 15-year-old.
that's the promising.
No. When he's old,
yeah.
you know,
when they're older.
she'll be in her teens.
Yes.
When he's calling some shots somewhere,
Yeah,
and we'll get her in the door there.
that is true.
You know.
Speaking of Eric, we were talking just before he came on, and I almost posted on Instagram today this, I'm going to screw up his last name. We were just talking about it before he came on. Balaji Srinivasan. Balaji Srinivasan. A couple of episodes ago on Tim Ferriss. I think it's the most important podcast I've heard this year in terms of changing there are like these podcasts that change your understanding of the world, of where things are headed. Like the Daniel Schmachtenberger one was a big one for me. It was like, I just didn't see the world the same way ever again.
Yeah.
After that, one of those particular episodes. And this one is like that. It's just like my understanding of this distributed future and crypto's place in it and is really important, like almost too big to take in. So yeah, anyone who's interested, that's sort of essential listening. It's 4 hours.
Yeah.
It's hilarious watching Tim Ferriss trying to keep up or listening to him trying to keep up. It's a thrill ride. But this guy is, you know, if he's right about a quarter of it, it's important.
I loved when Balaji would say something, be like, "Oh, so have you heard of a?" And he just names a thing, and Tim's like, "No," and laughs every time. It's so adorable. Nah. And then at one point he was like, "Oh, that's something I do know," and it was like one time. It was amazing because like that's how I feel when I listen to anybody talk about anything. I'm like, "Nah, I didn't know that," and then I look it up. I'm like, "Oh, that's cool. I love that. I didn't know anything that this guy was talking about.
Yeah.
I still don't." And I've listened to 8 hours of it. I listened to it twice. I still don't understand it. I mean, I understand the. I brought up at dinner tonight the book about the third world to first concept and what it takes a leader. Kind of the parallel drawn to a tech startup CEO that just sees the company and the world a little bit differently and is effective at changing infrastructure and protocol really dynamically and really vastly, but over slow periods of time that it goes under the radar. It's really unnoticeable, and all of a sudden there's a society that functions really well. Like Singapore was the example that he was talking about. And just to hear that it's possible, I guess, is enough for me to be like, oh, this is, you know, we're not dead in the water here. There can be change. We just gotta have some smarter people in the control.
I would say we have to have better incentives. There are plenty of smart people. I mean, you look at, we're not going to get into politics, but you look at someone like Ted Cruz. He's a very smart person, but the incentives are bad in the political system. And I can pick any example on the left too. That's not a partisan statement. A lot of these people are very bright. As Eric Weinstein would always say, the game right now is set up to incentivize acting, not leadership, not really doing the right things for everyone,
Yeah, speaking of incentive, I don't know if you guys listened to the newest Sam Harris podcast about the factory farming and the meat industry, but it's from the lens of cultured meats, lab grown, cell based, and the incentive structure came up. Like, you can't just tell people if you are eating meat, you're going to fuck up the environment. You have to make this for meat eaters. This is not for vegans. This is better and cheaper. And it tastes as good, if not better. It costs you less. And it's better for everything. Yeah. And the middleman is out. It just comes in. That's what you see places. We don't have to make any moral choices. It's And I like the incentivizing is the key here. It's like you're not going to change one person's mind. You have to change everybody's mind without knowing that they're changing your mind. And that's kind of what it is it seems like that when you just rebuild a city from the ground up, or you rebuild a country. You're not looking for it. You're not waiting for it. It just kind of happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know it's way above my pay grade. It's just...
it astounded me how... I've been banging on all of you all week to listen to it, because it astounded me how many of the topics we care about this guy is thinking about at a high level. And like the education thing, what he's doing in education is the way he's thinking about it is so forward looking, with micropayments and sort of leveling people up all around the world. It's just that there's a million things that we would do really, a bad rendition of. So just go and listen to it if you.
I listened 2 hours of it yesterday. I don't remember anything other than Tim Ferriss laughing.
Yeah.
It's a lot of words. He's not
dense.
a very expressive speaker. It's sort of a download
Yes.
of foreign things. It was hard for me to sort of stay on on track.
It's a bit Huberman. It's not. It's a little bit information dense and kind of like a lecture.
Yeah.
I found a lot of the ideas very exciting, and I listened to it on a walk the first time, so I was very available.
Yeah. I was driving.
But it's not easy listening. I would not say it's a pop record. It's kind of, but it definitely. I mean, I'm just coming up to the end of my second listen, and I'm going to go back for a third.
Same.
It's
Same.
very exciting in terms of his understanding of just all the stuff that we care about: community, education, sense making, the distributed nature, of modern work, distributed power structures. It's incredible how. I don't know. I mean, like if this guy had a cult, I'd probably just go join. Right now.
I think we're in it already. I don't think I really had the headroom to take it in because I absorbed pretty deeply the conversation, Michael, that I sent to you with Jocko Willink and Jordan Peterson.
Yes.
And they get in pretty heavily into, the high stakes community scenario, where, and it was sort of tying the high stakes thing into like why we came up with it as such an important thing in the desert. Like they really just go deeply into that idea that if you have low stakes, you have low meaning, you have, weaker bonds between people, and the higher the stakes among people, the more meaning and the greater the potential for reward of affiliation. And what better place than the Navy SEALs to express this?
Yes. Yeah, life and death.
Yeah,
Life or death.
But again, like it's that mutual investment between people and between households. That what we can be invested in peripheral ways or in very central, deep, meaningful ways. It's just, so sort of having those thoughts bouncing around in my mind from their perspective, and also this sort of musical, this moment I'm in with music and trying to understand why certain music is like a lightning bolt from across the world into my heart, and why other music isn't. Why some people can just point an iPhone at themselves and sing, and it completely takes me over, and other people can spend a year producing a record and it does nothing. And so this group that I mentioned I think I mentioned it last week, or maybe the week before, Trio Mandili, Mandili. They're from Georgia, the nation, not the state. 3 girls singing into an iPhone in the middle of Georgia somewhere, mountains, lakes.
While walking.
They walk. They walk slowly, the 3 of them. One plays the panduri, which is like a little 3-string guitar thing. And they just do it right there. Traditional Georgian songs, 3 young women. Sometimes in the marketplace, feels a little bit like an Anthony Bourdain travel show.
Yeah, it does.
Here and there. And I think they have sort of ambitions, like in this it's sort of a cultural, they're standing in front of a mountain range that the song is written about as they're singing. Anyway, it's really gripped me. I made a playlist about 11, 12 songs I've been sending around to people to try to put into words, what is this? Why is this so powerful? What is it about music of a time and place? Is it that it comes from somewhere? Is that these songs are so old, hundreds of years old? That music like that is inclusive of all generations, from that place who are familiar with it, and how it relates to those types of songs from the neighboring nations, the neighboring areas. And they'll do like Ukrainian / Georgian thing where they'll take a Ukrainian song and then for the last verse they'll flip it to like the Georgian rhythm or something like that.
Sick.
Like it's just they did a song with a guy from Kazakhstan. It was pretty hilarious. What is it about this music? I could say something about the kind of music we're used to hearing on the radio here, top 40 music, is you can sort of describe it as denatured, right? When I hear it, a lot of time it sounds like a cartoon in my mind. It doesn't. I'm not envisioning landscapes and anything that's natural. It's sort of outer space music, cartoon music.
It's been for quite a bit, a couple of decades.
Yeah,
And the idea of someone singing in an impassioned voice, "I love you." That's like, we would chuckle at that, like at how kind of 80s that is, or how that's like
how quaint or
it's a cheesy thing. You would never.
Yeah.
That's not what Beyonce's doing. She's not singing a direct. Everything is sort of sarcastic or ironic or guarded or veiled or
poetic,
hitted.
Deeply poetic sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of
sometimes.
Beyonce. I'm thinking of Beyonce at her best, like in the Superpower song with Frank Ocean and Pharrell.
Yeah.
So there's some beautiful poetry in that song.
Yeah.
About about love. About a bond. But even then, it's, what about all the rest of this? Like the kind of like the actually seeing on video the recording being made, like the evidence that it happened in real time. Like what does that do for you?
No safety net.
It's just without protection. I kept saying it's like taking the condom off. It's like music without protection. It's like someone was unafraid. It's like, what's their pitch doing, their intonation doing in these harmonies over? Like, I'm not even, don't care.
Don't care.
It's not even a thing.
Well, it sounds rehearsed. Who knows if they do, but they're playing their role. Their role is designated and they do it at the best of their ability. How much, when we're referring to top 40 pop music, how much of it is rehearsed then put down? It's just put down. And then it's put down in some sort of lackluster manner and then left there because it's quote unquote
it's
vibe.
Usually better if people
vibe.
Don't rehearse, because you get at least the spontaneity and the excitement of having just made it up.
Yeah, but you're talking about group spontaneity. You're talking about a connection amongst. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, if one person plays every part spontaneously, is it then spontaneous?
Yeah,
that's not a 20 layers. No, it's not. It's not like that. I want to come at this in the defense of, not that I believe anything I'm about to say. I'm just going to defend the top 40 music, considering I work on it most of the time. I'm trying, and I'm wondering if it's translating to, and I've talked about this for years, and we've talked about it too. Like when you have some sort of outer space sounding record, I'd like to think of the audio, if it's something synthetic, I want to make it sound more acoustic or treat it more realistic. And if something is acoustic and realistic, I kind of want to treat it more out of space. So it sounds otherworldly and unlike the time that it might have been made in, or the reference point would be. Like, I don't want to hear a record from 1983 ever again. I want to take a reference point from 1983 and that chorus effect and then make it sound like 2022 or whatever we're in or going for. And sometimes it resonates. Sometimes you treat that really stark, flat synthesizer with some lower harmonics and warmth, and you detune it slightly and make it warble and bring some life to it and some momentum and movement. It still doesn't feel like it's interacting with the other thing in the room. no matter how far you go, right? So I'm like, I have this sensibility to inject this naturalism into records that are being made today, and sometimes it hits, and some people like it, and other people just want space age. And it's like, what do we get? What in space age music is standing the test of time, like, and not lasting just for the moment and then forgotten, versus if we heard "I love you" over and over and over again, would that be the brave choice? Would that be the moment where everyone's like, oh, well, that person just straight up said, I love you, or I miss you, or just the world is better with you in it, or some like really straight to the point language, like a Jacques Brel, for example, like, in French would just say like the most direct lyric, and then you make people weep.
Sure.
Sorry, what do you?
Well, I mean, I don't know that the lyrics of these Georgian folk songs, I don't know what they're like.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Yeah.
I think Rory's point about the "I love you" thing is like, it has to do with the way culture has changed, and it goes to our question about, will Travis Scott do for the elderly folks of the future what Glenn Miller does for the elderly folks today?
Yes.
Like this sort of wholesome, like when we were talking about the what was the documentary on Alzheimer's? Almost
Alive Again,
Alive Inside, or something like that.
Yeah, Alive Inside, I think, or Alive Again,
something. Yeah. Will the records that young people are hearing today, will they have similar impact? If they were to develop something like Alzheimer's in the future, like would it connect them? Would it do this sort of same unlocking of their personhood?
And
it's that shift from that kind of wholesome presentation to, I don't know what you would describe that cultural shift.
Yeah.
Like, I know that even in rock music, there was a period where poetry in lyrics was one of the major features of music, and then suddenly it wasn't cool to actually say anything. It was a sort of postmodern pastiche. Lyrics that are deliberately open-ended and could be interpreted, just avant-garde lyric writing.
Yeah, and sonically they were put into the record. They weren't actually the focus. There were trippy effects and reverbs and delays, and
it's another instrument.
It was another instrument,
as we heard when we were young, when you were trying to get the guy to bring the fucking vocal down, mixing your band.
Exactly. No, for real.
Yeah.
But there's got to be something in that too. That seemingly is an opposite to what you're talking about, which is 3 women singing.
Well, because
there's nothing to hide behind.
Yeah, we talked about it at dinner the other night. We were sort of breaking it down and the different things at play. So there's like, at their end, the fact that these songs are mostly, I imagine, traditional songs, old songs, songs they grew up listening to, songs that by their nature, like we talked a bit at dinner with Sydney on Saturday about traditional Irish music. It's like everyone writes traditional Irish melodies and very few of them make it. You know what I mean? It's a kind of an evolutionary process of like, if the melody is good enough, then no one writes them down. Yeah. It's very rare. There are books of melodies, but it's not how the music lives. Music, every melody I know, I learned from listening. And the ones that were good, I've forgotten. And the ones that are great are all in my brain forever. So the music, there's a sort of an evolutionary sort of distillation that happens where the good songs make it. The songs that have meaning or hooky melodies or great harmonies or danceable rhythms. It's like, oh, these things fall just at that kind of easy dancing, whatever. And then we have the fact that, as you said, the no safety net. We're seeing a one-take moment. We have with the video, there's obvious, their joy, their expression, their sort of aliveness is obvious,
their
right?
interpretation.
Yeah. You can see them surprising each other.
Yes.
They're walking, and then one of them will just giggle like, because someone has flubbed a line or said it funny or put a weird emphasis on it, and that's like a really human thing, right?
They have really cool, like, subtle girl things too, where they'll like fix each other's hair real quick. It's like very YouTube generation.
Yes.
There's so many things at once.
And there's, as you said, they're walking, they're moving, you see people engage with them, kind of come up to them and smile at them and be in the shot and step out of the shot. They're in the neighborhoods where the songs are from. So there's all of that, dynamic at play. And then there's, say, the contrast between that and Top 40, right? When that lands in your inbox here, it's so, we just talked about it at dinner. So you go to New York and you have, part of your plan of going to New York was to eat some great meals. It's like New York is opening up again. You're going home to New York and so your meals are very telling. One was in an Italian trattoria, very simple foods. Was it a leek you said that was a...
Charred leek.
Charred leek.
Sheep curd.
So a great leek, sheep curd, and cooked well, probably a great olive oil, some nice salt.
Great olive oil, nice salt, pepper.
And then that experience
Crazy
was
dish. Probably
probably
the best, yes.
Profound thing I've been talking about for months at dinner, right?
Yeah.
These moments where you're just like, fuck.
Yeah.
Kind of a moment of truth. And then the other end of your experience was a really fancy Michelin star meal
14 courses.
where someone is doing this incredible expression,
yes.
know? So I'm thinking that this record landing in Spider's inbox is a charred leek, is a simple expression of something timeless and rooted and grounded. And then there are other records that we love, like that are being made. We've talked a bunch with Ethan here about the Phoebe Bridgers record.
Yeah.
That's a record that can only exist in that way in the modern era. It's a record of its time, but it is fabricated and constructed and written and composed and edited and mixed. It's a modern production. And it's laden with emotion and truth and meaning and
but it's constructed to sound like it happened.
Oh yeah. No, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's constructed.
There's some vocal doubling and things that are impossible, but
yeah. It's certainly not a digital confection, right? But the point is, I guess what I'm getting to is, we explored at dinner all these mechanisms, but this thing about intent, we kicked it around the last couple of weeks. I'm not sure that a lot of people making records now really know what it is they're trying to say. What it is they're trying to do, what it is the music can be. There isn't a clear sense of, not of like, you made a record, I'm pointing to Spider here, people. You made a record, so I'm going to make a record that's as good, that sounds like, that's influenced by, that references,
That's a social incentive.
That's a relative thing.
Sure.
Yeah. It's the girls are playing Lego at home. Mirabelle builds a house, Ellie builds a house. She's looking at Mirabelle's house and she's like copying, but evolving, imitating, but all of that. That's different than a true artist who has something to say and finds a way to say it through art.
So are there no Irish folk true artists?
Oh, there very much are. Yeah, I mean, all of these melodies came from someone.
Yeah.
I have friends who've written some of the modern classic tunes, right? So they all come from someone. And of course, there's the art of interpretation, right? Which is what we see these girls doing. Yeah. But in that, there's intent. There's clear intent, and I think that's a missing piece in the modern music landscape. Is a sense, really a sense, even that's possible for a lot of people. It certainly seems remote or abstract or kind of like the intent to really express something.
I kept thinking, what can modern artists do, modern top 40 artists do to leverage whatever the power of this trio mondili thing that I'm feeling? It's a long lever. It's like, how can we harness whatever
bring
that
other
power
people in
is?
the room? It's not a solo mission. It can't be. Like I'm thinking about being in those rooms, and I've been in them with writers and artists, mostly with other writers. And there's no intent when you're in there with a bunch of writers because you don't know who the artist is you're writing for. And you just spit something out or play something down. It's like, that's cool. Let's go from there. It's just a bunch of ideas.
You're making a product.
You're making a product. And if the artist is in the room, how can you expect there to be intention? But also, then the artist then buys, or the label or the artist, whoever, buys the record that they connect with, but it wasn't their intent to create it. So then it's another level of manufacture. Even a performance that is compelling from a great artist, Ariana Grande sings a record and it's that good and it wins, it still doesn't have the level of intent that we're trying to get down to. It can't.
It's got a hook.
200 years ago in Georgia, the nation Georgia again, were there writing camps? You know what I mean? Like I don't imagine some of these songs were written by one person of the same generation. Like these girls aren't starting from scratch with songs, right? They're using songs that couple hundred years old, maybe older, in their roots, and they evolve. And how it's almost not even fair. Like you have to start from scratch, like
every
with
time?
a blank page and a blank session in order to try to connect with people. These girls are using songs that survived because they're so good at connecting.
Yeah.
Let's look at, we've talked about, you know, when we referenced David White a few weeks ago, we talked about how language, say poetry or music, they're not poetry particularly, say music. Music is a way of expressing things that we don't have words for. There are songs that I hope everyone's had the experience of a song cracking you open, of that thing where like you're all fucked up and you've got all these feelings inside and you've talked to your friends about it and you're no better off, and you know you're walking home from the fucking movie theater or whatever, and you hear a song in your headphones and you just fucking fold, right? You collapse because the song just is saying or making you feel or resonating with that thing, that inexpressible, ineffable feeling, right? So in that situation, music is a language that takes over where the written word runs out, right? Where we can't say it and we can't express it in that. So music is another dimension, right? So it's a language. Let's assume that it's a language which has components like words are to the written language. And the idea that you would, if we just put words on a page without an intent, we would have nonsense. Like if I just said, well, Shakespeare used all these words. These are good words, right? This is a dope word that Mamet used in a couple of his plays, right? So I'm going to take these words and I'm going to arrange them on a page. Like it's nonsense. You have nothing. You have words. And that's really what we're doing in music, is we're using this language. We're arranging it without intent, without anything to say, and we end up with nonsense. Now, it just so happens that you can put it on a grid and it still will make you dance, and you can look upon a hook, which is different to intent or truth or conveying emotion. It's a hook.
The hook is the confection.
Yeah.
It's a kind of magic. Why should that be so much more attractive that way than having one different note in the melody?
Maybe hooks are physics or
exactly.
There's got to be something biochemical, physical there.
Yeah, like birdsong or something, right? But a hook, we know a hook isn't enough. A great melody isn't enough. So anyway, that's my pitch, is that in modern record making, we're assembling words on a page with no actual thing to say, no sentence.
Well, I would say with modern music, because it is shared by so many people, it is of a time and place, right? So when a record drops, it doesn't drop into a vacuum. It drops into a cultural milieu that's made of all the shit that was made in the last couple of years.
Correct. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
You're sort of thinking about looking at Spotify top play numbers, right? That's maybe the center of what I'm talking about.
Sure.
But that soundtrack to that time and place for young people today is not the same soundtrack from 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 100, 200 years ago. Whereas these traditional folk songs have a deep history, deep connection, and can bring together all generations.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting principle. Sort of the idea of the generation gap getting wider every generation isn't, it's not a new idea.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways it does. Technology is doing a lot. I think Apple's doing a lot to bring grandmoms and grandkids together. But there's this sort of youth culture thing. I don't know how young these girls are in this group, but they seem like older teenagers or early 20s to me, right? And I don't know a lot of people in the States this age singing 200-year-old songs or 100-year-old songs or however long,
And it's unlikely that we're going to convince our audience or anyone to sort of take up that mantle, right? But
what are the learnings?
The learning.
That's what
I'm
saying. Yeah. It's like, what are the elements? Like, one, songwriters are interested in copyright. I mean, evergreen copyrights is, that's the game. So, to me, all songwriters are interested in this, if they're care at all about the business of it.
Yeah, a song that goes for a long time.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this timelessness, this record that has something to say. I mean, the classic records that we keep coming back to. The reason the Beatles and Zeppelin and Stevie Wonder are still on, my nephews and nieces' playlists and my kids' playlists is because they have these timeless qualities. They're not quite folk songs in the way that they're all the folk music I grew up with in Ireland. Very few people know who wrote the songs. There are some that are attributed, but many of them are just and you will find the same melody being used in 5 or 6 different songs in different regions. There are like melodic backbones that are used for different things, and but basically the song was good enough to survive, and so are the Beatles. The Beatles are still crushing it on playlists and numbers. The songs are good enough, and they're hooked into culture and people's awareness enough. So I suppose for a songwriter, number one is like, wouldn't it be great to write a song that good? A song that has longevity because it speaks a kind of truth or has a kind of intent, a powerful expression of something that, again, the words don't work for, right?
Yeah.
Here Comes the Sun, that feeling is not there. Like, give me a sentence that sums up the feeling of that song. There isn't one.
Yeah.
Like, let's have some hope. It gets better tomorrow. Like,
try optimism.
Yeah, exactly. It's all trite. And that song from the very start of the picking, it's just like, it's
a second chance.
It's all sorts of wonderful, right?
Yeah.
So, you were asking the question, what can songwriters do? And I think it sounds ridiculous, but I think a lot of people in modern music need to understand that it's possible. Yes. This thing is just,
I think it's artists, it's not songwriters. Like, the perspective is who's singing the thing? Like, who's deciding where it's being sung?
I think you can hear a song that an artist can hear a song that they connect with and then go with that writer and shape it.
Yeah.
And make it their own. I think that's maybe the happy medium here, because there are some great songwriters that will never be artists that can lend a hand here and connect and
Billie
deeply
Holiday,
connect.
Ella Fitzgerald, Frank Sinatra. These performances, these expressions are timeless. They didn't write the songs. I mean, take a Cole Porter song.
Yeah, Cole Porter, exactly.
Right. So we know that it isn't. You don't have to write it for it to be. Yeah. To have this thing, right? We've already that's already been decoupled.
Yeah.
I don't know, Michael. Save us from ourselves.
That was coming.
Well, I've been looking over at
I have a list of things that I heard you guys say in one form or the other. I think some of the components that or conceptions that might be part of a song that's intentional. So if that makes any sense. So I have a list of about 14 different descriptions or something,
attributes,
words,
characteristics.
let's say. Characteristics that I think you could think about how you could implement them into a process. You probably, I mean, given the state of songwriting and artistry or lack thereof today, I think taking any of these and integrating them would be a really tough ask. But let me read through them and get your take.
Cool.
So, and like I said, there's like 16 of them, so give me a minute. Generational was one of them. Like it relates to generations before it. Communal, involving other people. This naturalistic quality, relating to nature or the natural, emotions of humans. Personal, I think there's something about the connection of the song to the performer that's lacking. So like this personal nature, how can I, if someone gives you a song and you don't relate to it, it's hard to make that personal, unprotected. So some level of high stakes in the performance or the writing of it or all of it. Unafraid related to that. Rehearsed. I think that's kind of on a spectrum though, because some of that improvisational nature is important, but you can get there after rehearsing.
That's like embodying the music.
Exactly.
Rehearsal is like a way of embodying it.
Yeah.
Embodiments. Yeah, that's that person. That's what I was trying to get at with personal.
Yeah.
But I like that word, embodiment. This idea of transcending time, like we keep talking about it, and I think like people aim to do that. It's like, oh, let's write a timeless song, or that's, they might not say that out loud, but internally they feel that it's like that's not something you could really put into a song. But I wrote that down just as a talking point, that these other attributes you can create, process, for lack of a better word, to or alter your process to achieve these at a higher level. Anyway, let me keep going. Brave is one of them. This idea of evidence being this like artifact of a time. I think that was the part that I was getting at with like Travis Scott on Fortnite. Like it's evidence of a time, like that couldn't have happened before. And in the future it won't, because there's going to be VR or something. Like there's something related to like, does it speak to the time it was made? Even like classical folk songs speak to like before things were complicated. You know what I mean? And Travis Scott, a video of him in the Fortnite universe is like speaking to things that are complicated, and the fact that thousands of people can be in this digital world. Like it's kind of a sign of the times without trying to be like a caricature of the time in a way, kind of harnessing what is existing. So I have high stakes here, but I think that's sort of related to like timeless and the unafraid part. Unencumbered. So I think that gets at this sort of space agey type of writing that's happening here, where it's like people are layering so much on top of something that's not even that good at the bottom. You know what I mean? It's like encumbered with lots of things, lots of pizzazz, like just like effects and multiple, people putting shit on a master bus and like just going nuts with it without like having anything at the bottom.
These girls trio Mondili, I'm going to keep saying that. They're not encumbered by the notion of like being a little bit out of tune. They're not encumbered by fears. I think there's a lot of ways where that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I guess like depending on the culture, it changes even more, you know, like if you're a songwriter in LA versus a songwriter outside of LA in California somewhere versus another country or whatever. But I love that. It's absolutely true. I just wrote meaning. I mean, I think that's what Rory was getting at with intent. Like, is there actually meaning behind these words? On the Jocko interview with Jordan Peterson, Jocko was saying why he loved Shakespeare was because every word he had to like look up. Shakespeare is like historically very difficult to read. I've read pretty much all of his works in college, and it was a nightmare initially. It's just like every single stanza or sonnet was just like hours of Googling and discussing, and it was so rich with meaning. Every word he used was intentional and had meaning. So I like that one. Joy, and then I just wrote rich with emotion. I think joy is an emotion, but like I posted the other day, like that wheel of emotions, like instead of saying be human, it's, you know, if a consultant says make this brand human, it's like, well, really, where on this spectrum of humanity does the song exist? Is it in sadness, and like how deep into that space is it? And like how rich with the emotion is it? Then I have 4 more. The connectedness of players. So like the people in the room, how connected are they to the work and the connected to the emotion or any of the other things that I mentioned? Like, are they equally as aligned with all of those attributes, or at least attempting to be, or, you know, closer to? Honesty, so that's sort of related to the emotional part and also the bravery part and the unafraid part. You said rooted and grounded. I wasn't really able to decode that fully, but I felt like it's worth saying. It kind of feels to me like natural, like of this world. And then historical, not necessarily referencing history, but something referencing the unchanged parts of the human experience throughout history. I think that is important. That's why Shakespeare has existed for so long. I mean, all of his work has been, the stories inside of the work are unchanged and can be applied to situations year over year over year, decade over decade. And then also, I think Jordan Peterson said it in the interview just about like, he's like, I don't understand why people don't love history. Like, people should be like obsessed with history. And I've been feeling that a lot lately. I think there's something to be said about artists and like their relationship with music history and like how deep they go into that and how much they know, even about like if they're trying to be the best rapper, like how deep into the history do you even know? Like, and to what fidelity, you know? And like, is it just a broad history of rap, or is it the history of one artist that you really admire? Or like, how deep are you going with this? And so I think history plays a role. So that was all of the takeaways that I had from all of you guys kind of riffing on this. I've been interested to decode what Spider's been saying about these artists, because it does immediately speak to something that is not happening in the mainstream, but I don't think that is actually able to be applied one-to-one with the mainstream. But I think these components, any of them or all of them, could be applied. Like, they're abstracted enough that they could be applied.
It could explain why some artists work today, like a Billie Eilish, you know, like the sort of commitment to like not auto-tuning, or, you know, like a lot of vocal editing makes it feel more of a time and place. The fact that you know it's from a bedroom in Highland Park makes it from a time and place.
Though in that documentary,
it grounds it.
When you watch her and Phineas work on those songs, it's kind of like those videos. It's iPhone videos of them writing the hooks for these global smash hits, and it's of a time and place. It's two people in that bedroom, connected deeply, high stakes. Their whole life is bound up in this record. Their whole family's life is bound up in this record. Yeah. It's basically everything we talked about. And it is this global smash because of it just has these attributes. And you think, like, when you're running down your checklist, Michael, you think of all of the challenges of modern, just getting people in a room to make a record, like just being in touch with your feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we say, hey, let's make some music, right? And any time in history, has there been a harder time in history to be in touch with your feelings? You know, I mean, that's I'm asking as a real question. I mean, I'm guessing that, you know, in the Blitz in London in 40 whatever, I don't know, maybe it was harder.
Without a doubt, there's so much to distract us from confronting our feelings. Of course.
So you have people who are either distracted, numb, whatever the modern experience, the modern relationship with feelings is, right? Preoccupied. Then you have just the as someone on some podcast said it this week, it might have been in that Balaji thing. He was like, it's very normal for people now to not know the person who lives in the apartment next door at all. Like you see them once and you're like, is that the dude who lives next door? And to be sharing intimate feelings with strangers across the world on the internet. Like you're sharing like the most vulnerable stories about whatever.
Yeah.
These deep connections that are remote and ignoring the person who's next to you, right? That's kind of strange. So there was one other thing that jumped out from what you said. The history thing, you know, again, back to the Charlie Munger quote, like, show me the incentives and I'll tell you the outcomes. The history thing, there's no incentive for modern business, for the modern economy to use history. I mean, it's referenced briefly. It's like throwback jeans or, you know, this Motown snare. But basically, the modern incentive, there's no incentive for modern consumerism to connect us to history. It's you know, I've talked many times here about the incentive is to atomize us, to separate us, to sell to us, but also to disconnect us from our history, because that history gives you meaning. And if you have meaning, you don't need
it's
the
longitudinal
jeans,
separation.
or the whatever, any of the things we would buy, the candle or the, you know, whatever. So there's that strong incentive in culture to disconnect us from history, and the lack of ability to be touched. And then I think the last thing is this idea. So I think when I go through the list of the greatest artists I've ever been in the room with, either sessions I've recorded or the TV work I did or shows I've seen, but people that I've hung out with, that I've related to, aside from watching them perform, they were all, let's call it the 20 greatest, they were all fairly dysfunctional people. They were they were racehorses for music and for expression and emotion, but they were often very broken or difficult or unbalanced. And we think about the modern conversation. It's, you know, we talked about it. I talked about it on a walk the other day with Dan Marcellus, who might be listening. And it's like this American story of optimizing everything. It's like when you're the optimum thing, the optimum session, the optimum surroundings, it's like that's not where a lot of the great art came from. It didn't come from optimum. It came from huge emotions that found a way to be expressed, you know. Was the, you know, Robert Johnson, the blues guitarist, like, was that optimum? Did he have what he needed? Like, was it a great context for writing and making music? It's like the thing came through despite that. And maybe a bad example, but I don't know.
I like what you're, real quick,
yeah,
just to kind of paraphrase that, like this idea that people aren't incentivized to dive deep into their emotions because they're busy optimizing for like an ideal emotion
for
like
production.
Production.
It's
no
probably
emotion.
Part of my
moving emotion to be productive.
It's part of my allergy probably to the word process, which you know, a lot of it I'm over. But let's imagine if you said to me, if you gave me a choice, young artist, you know, young Billy, right? Billie Eilish, whatever. We're going to give you the time, the budget, the gear, the producer, the context to make a great record, or we're going to give you the time, the context, the budget to go and live and feel and connect. You know, I would bet on Billy in the latter scenario with an iPhone over a disconnected, distracted, pressured, optimized, in air quotes, Billy.
But why would that be optimized?
It's not optimized, is my point. But in the modern,
if you took one meeting with her, you wouldn't optimize that way.
But most
you'd optimize the way you just described.
But most everyone, I would say not most everyone, 99.5% of people are optimizing the way that we've just penciled as wrong. They're saying, well, it's 1 4-hour block a day with the Apollo in the place. I live in this part of town. But even bands, people are making the right decisions, but they're not actually leaving room for the life, the feeling, the emotions, I was reading a post from Lanois recently, and he was like talking about entering a new phase of creativity, and he said that in his experience, his waves of creativity tend to last about 4 years. He gets on a trip for about 4 years with a sound or a band or a texture or an emotion or a theme, and he kind of rides it. Yeah. And it might be in France, it might be in Montreal, it might be in New York, it might be here. He sort of moves and gets inspired. You know, there was the Emmylou Harris phase or the U2 phase, obviously, which was multiple times. His own records, New Orleans, you know. But that commitment to the feelings, the emotions, the space, the muse, the things that generates great art, rather than, well, I've got my 96 channel Neve here in LA, so I'm going to stay here because that's where my studio is. It's like, no, just go where you're going to be inspired. You know, go find the leak with the curd and the olive oil.
I think it's a problem of optimization is what you're optimizing for.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But I think what I'm describing, there's very few people in the modern, if you ask most people in the modern music business, hey, we need to get a record made with a talented artist. How should we do it? Nobody will say, take their phone away from them and send them on the road for a year.
It sounds like you're speaking about the pressure that surrounds the idea of optimization. So like the imposing functions on the creative process when people are thinking about optimization. Like everyone's kind of has different incentives, right? They're optimizing for different things, and then that can choke out creativity. Is that connecting with what you're saying?
I guess I'm saying I want to create conditions where I just mastered. I've had a really good run this last week of really interesting, good projects, but I mastered a record yesterday for an artist called Tommy, and it was just fucking extraordinary. It's just gorgeous record from the first note to the 5-track EP, and so laden with everything we're talking about. It was, and I just found out today that it was recorded in a very similar kind of context that I'm painting as being the ideal. It was like the outcome of, you know, a breakup, and went to a place to do it, and it was recorded very bare bones, but it's got all the things, you know. So I'm kind of on this trip right now. But I think what I'm saying is that it's alien language to most people. I want artists, if you said to me, create the conditions for artists, I want them to have feelings so enormous that they're going to express them via this pen, this glass, by banging on this table. What is the Eric said it, remember I played you that Modern Lovers track, Spider, the Hippie Johnny track, one of the nights you were up. Maybe you and Michael. This song, Modern Lovers, and the Eric Weinstein quoted the singer as saying, you know, how did he say it? It was something along the lines of, it's not music if you can't, you know, if they take away your instruments and you can't do it, it's not music. Like it was something of like this, these emotions, these feelings, this thing we're trying to say has to sort of transcend any limitations. So if I've got a feeling so big that I can play it on a guitar with 4 strings, or I can bang it on a table, or I can just get you guys to harmonize with me, and we can create that tension.
I have a little tension with the way this is being framed.
Okay.
So maybe this is true of some artists, but I mostly hear artists talking about emotions moving through them, or emotions sort of showing up in the act. Never as a thing that's contrived in advance. Like, I'm feeling a certain way, and now I'm having big emotions now, so now I'm going to express that in a song. Like, a good song might be written in that state, but to me, that is irrelevant to the quality of the song. Lyrics arrive as randomly as any other thought you have. And your taste is sort of like, oh, that's a good line. Let's keep that one. Oh, that's a shit line. That doesn't build on it. It's all sort of happening to you as an artist. And that's all I want to say, is that it's not like a journal entry the way I've ever experienced it and the way I hear other artists talking about it. It's a kind of emergent phenomenon that comes through the practice.
Yeah, you've got to be doing it.
And you recognize it once you hear it first yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
The same way other people hear it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all.
Okay,
I'm painting a sort of an extreme where someone goes away and, in a way that's alien to modern culture, feels some shit. There's a minute where they feel some stuff. That's the, I'm being extreme.
No,
in
being
that,
available to the emotions coming through. That's the other.
That's it really. And I think we have a sort of a famine of that right now.
I remember when we were, when I was Spider as well with me, we were producing records out of this space, and one of the main attractions for me was the upright piano that happened to be in the loft when I moved in, and we cultivated a generous portion of the studio, of the loft, to not have any technology in there. It was just a piano, so you can go to that area to hear the song as the song in its rawest form. There's an acoustic guitar there was a piano there, and then there was a sofa and chair. It was like, okay, cool. You can make a song on the computer, but take it over there and see if it translates. And how does that? So if that same artist were to come over the next day, walk up the stairs, and remember the little ditty that we came up with the day before and just play it there, that's what I want to hear. I want to hear that sort of improv version of what we wrote the day before. And then that's the record. And it was intentional for this purpose because, and going back to a couple of things Michael was talking about, the pizzazz, strip the pizzazz out of the record, and what's the record? And today, mixing a song that I think is quite good for a pop song, I just kept muting so many things. It's like 8 guitars. It's like the song can be great with 1 guitar. This song is actually really cool with the vocal, the guitar, and this like pulsing bass. Like that's the record to me. And you start unveiling all these other things and just getting in the way. So I'm like taming this here, pulling this down here, muting this, panning this, darkening this, doing all these things to get out of the way of the song, when that can just be done in the inception.
Yeah.
And if you're emotionally available enough to know that what you had was great on inception of idea, you might not be so insecure with it to keep compounding on top of it, getting things in the way of the initial idea. I don't know. I think like my job, or one of my fortes as a producer that I don't get to do much anymore because it's just a big headache a lot of the time, is no, we don't need that. No, why are we doing that? Like after you let them do it, it's just like, no, that's not the thing. Like it didn't make it better. Was it cool on its own? Sure, it's another record. Save it. Exactly. Save as, let's move on. I wish I could do that more in mixing, honestly.
I'm going through it with a client right now. Long story, but current project is self-mixed and a bunch of songs and ambitious, musically ambitious, technically it's big. One of the songs, first mix, first master, just clicked. It's there. Approved it immediately, which we hadn't had any of that. Stuff was mixed by other people before that. It was an immediate like, oh, this is it, right? And then months go by and they send it out for feedback and there's notes that there's not enough sub, kind of dubby music. And it's like, okay, and I literally rewrote some of your words in my notes today, Spider, because it's this idea of, you know, a song mix master, when it's done, is a closed system. Everything depends on everything else. You can't come in to a closed system and say, this is great, let's just add a bunch more sub.
Right.
Like we're already at -7 point something or -8 on a record with a huge low end, and you know, it's a loud record. So getting an extra 2 dB of stuff below 50.
It's a process.
It's not, well, it's just that we can do that, but we've got to let go of what we had. That's gone now. The snare and the vocal and the relationship and all the width and the level, that's an old story. Now we're making a new record. But that why it came to mind is just that trust. I did a pass today on it, added all the extra low end. It's worse. And okay, they got notes from some heavy people that it needs more sub. And I'm thinking of that Lego kid building Lego, looking at the other kid. It's like, what are they doing? Like, who cares what the other kids are doing? You hit on something here.
Yeah.
You guys did some work, and you knew it, and I knew it, and we all knew it when you had it the first time. Don't second guess it. It should be released already. We shouldn't be revisiting it 2 months later, out of fear that other people have more sub in their records.
Yeah, we keep coming back to fear. Fear is so. I think it was when we started listening to old African records a lot, like 2016. You want to talk about fearlessness?
Yeah. All the fear was taken completely out of me when it came to low end, and
it was so stark. Like in comparison to a lot of records coming across John's desk, which were super edited, all buttoned up, like perfectly everything. And it was like, nobody wants to hear your fear.
Yeah.
It was the thing we kept saying, like, how do we make this feel less afraid? And when I see Trio Mondoli on YouTube, they're not afraid. And it's freeing. And when I watch these videos, I feel better.
Yeah.
Simple fact. I feel better, right? It's like I'm ingesting something nutritious and I'm trying to understand what the fuck the nutrients are.
Right.
What is it? Why can this be so effective and the record industry can't be at making me feel good?
That's a really good question.
This is a crazy question. And that's why I'm saying there are some long levers here that modern artists can pull on. There's some learnings here about fear and how it's communicated. Who can smell it?
Look at the truly global smashes, not the momentary, not but like Billie, Adele, Kanye at his height, like original U2. It's all clearly fearless. You know what I mean? It has that quality. So definitely that sort of referential consciousness of the neighbors, what people are doing, that game doesn't seem to serve. Of course, like if you're mixing records, you've got to make them sound like sit in a playlist, you know what I mean? I mean, I
was just thinking the opposite. Like, I mean, yes, the answer is yes, but that should be in your bones.
Yeah.
I don't want to, I referenced today for Graham, because Graham was playing me some records and I was like, these sound more like this. And I pulled up a reference, but that wasn't for me. That's for young Graham. That's for young Graham to learn how to mix. He needs to understand how to compete on these playlists that I and my peers are already competing on, and that goes away. So I would argue that you should not be referencing.
Yeah, I'm not.
After a certain point.
Depends.
I'm not.
Yeah,
it depends. If someone says, yo, I like this effect and it's on this record, like I want that on the bridge vocal.
That's
like
creative.
That's creative, and it's the best way to show me what the idea is.
And you'll know the references anyway.
Sure.
A couple of times this week, I've said to people, sending back a master, it's like, we're talking about. It's like I did as little as possible to change this thing, but to where it could hang on a playlist. That's all we need to do is like keep your weird, keep your vibe, keep your texture. You know, like this Tommy record that I did yesterday. It's like it has a very strong vibe and texture. It's like, how can I make it more of itself, loud enough to hang, but not, fix it or polish it or popify it or, and that to me is something I couldn't have done. This record I couldn't have done anywhere near as good a job. I would say even as recently as a year ago, I would have been more fearful.
Yeah, I want to touch on two things. So one goes back to the fear and where Spider was coming from. We don't want to hear your fears, like the idea of unbuttoning and loosening up things. I was listening to some mixes with Graham today, and when I hear young mixers, when I hear actually great mixers,
Graham is our new co-producer.
Yeah.
Young mixer.
Young
he's sitting here at the table without Mike.
Yeah, young Graham, so just to me as a mixer
who don't know Graham yet.
Graham played me some really great mixes today that he was a part of, and gave me a new light into I hate this word, the potential that there is within his ears and his taste. But one thing that I haven't said about any mixes shown to me recently was the word active. I love when things feel activated. Like there's something about it that's out of control and you don't know what it is necessarily, but it's not super contained and tight. Tony would always like knock me down with this. He'd be like, "Great mix, bro. Really tight."
Yeah.
Like what's going to jump out at you? What's going to captivate you here? What's going to draw your attention here? And when I heard Graham's mixes, that's what I was noticing. I was like, oh shit, that synth is crazy on the left. Like, whoa, what's happening? Like, but I like, that's what makes you feel good, right? There's a moment to reach in and
unencumbered.
It's unencumbered. And that's like when I take a rough mix and do my thing to it, it's loosening that shit up. It's bringing that energy and that forward motion and these moments, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm actually in a way trying to unmix the record. When I take the rough, I'm trying to unmix the rough.
Unmixed by John Castelli.
Yeah,
uninhibit. Yeah,
uninhibit it. That's my taste, and I'm still working it out. Meaning I'm still finding that balance of that dense, controlled vocal top end that will sit on playlists and compete, so you sound like a star and you're the focus. And anyway, so these are things that I'm thinking of that that's what feels good. That's what we hear in a record. That it gives us the choice to lean in, the choice to hear, to change perspective and focus in on something else and re-listen to the record, not a one-time next. And,
we
things
use the
to
word,
come back to.
Lifelike a lot.
Yeah, lifelike.
That's the best way I've heard you describe what you do so far. That's good. I like that a lot.
That's what I do.
A kind of an unwinding and uninhibiting, de-fearing, making the moves bolder, getting the things that are unnecessary out of the way to let the things that are communicating real emotion speak in that more. The word. What did you say about the synth and Graham's mix? You had a word for it.
Active.
Yeah, that's to me. The word I've always been using is dangerous. With that kind of sense of like, whoa, what's going on here? Like, same kind of thing. Unpredictable, exciting, whatever that might be.
Yeah, human-like, natural. That's how the world is.
Yes. Yeah.
It's something nonlinear. In a linear style of music creation that we're discussing, for better or for worse, who's to say? And along that line, something
comes and goes.
Something comes and goes, and these flattened experiences. There's another way. It's kind of what we're talking about. Closed loop on that idea. There's another thing I wanted to just take a pivot. Another thing is one of Michael's words that he extracted from our riff, and I have no real thoughts on it, but I think it's a worthy word to bring up and pick apart for a few. And it's the word timeless, because it does come up. It's said, it's the most used word in music creation in the past 5 years. I think when you're in the room or you're getting notes from people, trying to make something timeless today. It's like the new, we're going to write a hit today. Like that's
hit's not
that's
enough.
passe. It's not, yeah.
It's got to be a timeless hit.
And now we're talking about timeless hits, right? And what does that mean? So I'm going to put that on the left. And on the right is Spider and Rory talking about records that seem to win and stand the test of time, have context of a time and a place. So how can a timeless record exist in a time and a place?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you want to go?
Yeah. I mean, if you think about a film,
Okay.
like a movie, a great film will be about a specific person in a specific time and place, but the underlying truth is so universal that it transcends time and place. I was on the phone with George Hazelrig yesterday, and I brought this thing up to him, sent him the playlist, trying to
Tell people who George is for listeners who've joined
George
us.
is a very good friend of mine. He's incredible piano player and harpsichordist.
If you've heard our theme, you've heard George playing.
Yeah, you've heard George and his brother Joff and John O'Reilly Jr. They're known as the Hazelrig brothers. George and Joff also run DW Fern for Doug Fern, and they make the most beautiful outdoor gear ever made. And George is he is a student of music. He has a deep conservatory background in classical music. I mean, if you've seen the movie Whiplash, you might know what his high school years were like playing jazz. He did go to Princeton High, and he's very much a high horsepower race car of a human. Love George. And so, he's been a big part, George and Joff have both been a big part of this sort of core conversation I've been having for the 20 years that I've known them about audio engineering and about quality and about music production and all these big questions that we talk about here. A lot of what I say here is built on the conversations I've had with them over 20 years. So that should place Georgie.
Yeah.
So I was talking to George and his idea is that you actually can't reach that deep universal level of truth without having a real context. Like you have to have an example person, time and place in order to enter into the realm of universal truth. You can't just make how would you even make a universal, what is a universal story that doesn't involve an example of a time and place and a person or a group of people? Like, what does that even, otherwise you're just sort of, you're offering descriptions of the way things are. Like maybe that's where science and mathematics and philosophy come into play, where you can make beautiful poetic statements about the way things are. But, it's very when you think about films and stories, and it just becomes so obvious that it's like through an example that the thing, at a deeper level.
The reason I was bringing it up was that I'm recently obsessed with, I brought it up earlier, the Floating Points, Pharoah Sanders London Symphony record that came out. I've listened to it probably 4 times since last night to this afternoon. And have you listened to it, Rory?
No. Tonight.
It feels timeless in a sense where when I walked around the neighborhood today listening to it, I wasn't in the neighborhood, right? I was somewhere else, and I didn't exist in a time for 47 minutes, even though I'm aware of the length of the time that it took to, complete the journey that they took us on. And there is speaking of George, I'm going to send it to him later. I forgot. I meant to do it this afternoon. On the left side, the theme of the whole 9 movements is a piano on the left and a harpsichord on the right.
Oh, shit.
Hand hardcore, doing a theme that never changes for 47 minutes. Some harmonic minor, dreamy, bit that's kind of like going through the looking glass, and very Alice in Wonderland. And
So kind of a looping melody?
Yep,
Right.
looping melody. I believe it's 2 variations on the melody, and they never stop, except for different layers are put on it. Sometimes it's only the piano. Most of the time it's the piano and the harpsichord panned. Sometimes the violins do the thing, and it's layered upon. But then in the middle of that, you have Pharoah Sanders, legendary tenor saxophonist, coming in with only the breath, right? So you hear the spittle on the reed, right? And I'm a sax player for many years, and so I know what that is. Some people might be like, "Oh, what's that sound?" But it's like the spit on the reed, getting ready to blow air through, and but that's dry and that's in front. The symphony. I'm describing the scene. There's an obvious setting. There's obvious context, but it's a context we've never heard before, because then there are these fluttery Moog synthesizers, that floating points, the producer and the composer, teases us with, right? They're very abstract and transitory. There's these things don't last very long. These blips, these space agey blips in time. So there's no real sense of time or context, yet there's an obvious one because we know what all of these sounds are. To a degree, besides the space age synths, you can imagine what they are, but you don't really know what they are. We know as producers what they are. And I could give 2 shits what the context was, right? Like, knowing the Billy story, I love the Billy story, but I didn't need to know that to know it was special.
It's all in the record.
It's all in the record.
They captured it. Yeah.
That goes back to 2 weeks ago, talking about the mystery, where the social media has gotten involved, and now there's no real mystery to the artist. I know everything the artist is thinking and doing, and I don't about this project. And it was the first, this goes back to 2 nights ago in New York with Rob Moose over a bottle of Dovisat Chablis. Thanks, Rob Moose, for that bottle. It was extraordinary. Me kind of complaining about what we're talking about here, bringing up the fact that there's very little innovation at the moment. And he pointed out this record. He was like, "This is the most innovation in music I've heard in about a decade." And it was, he's also in a contemporary classical sextet, and he's been talking about how to implement that kind of avant-garde, orchestral arrangement in modern music a bit more. He gets hired to do these things, like he's on Bon Iver records, and he's on the Phoebe Bridgers record, and he gets his chance to put this stamp in. And I think those kind of decisions and maneuvers give us a kind of a foreshadowing of the possibility of timelessness occurring in a record, because it's a feeling that we have heard before. Like when I hear Rob do some wilty kind of descending flourish on a violin or on a viola, it reminds me of a Disney movie. It reminds me of like a black and white film. And I can get this kind of nostalgia from that. But then the way he sets it, the context he sets it in is now. And that's knowing his process. It's mostly improvisational, so it's captured in a moment, and it's not overthought, it's not edited, and it's not dissected to what it could be from there. It is left alone until there's feedback.
So a conversation between the past and the present, the artist and the listener, right?
Say that again?
A conversation between the past and the present, the artist and the listener. That's kind of what we're identifying, right? And I think of,
beautiful.
It's funny. I sent Dylan, Dylan, our producer, a short film this week from a friend of mine in Ireland, and it's a film. I think I told 1 or 2 of you about it, but it's a film that a poet, musician friend of mine directed with a very unique story that I'll maybe tell another time. But it's set on the lakes that I have described my dad fishing, and the lakes that I went out on boats with him as a kid. But as you were describing Rob's flourishes and the sort of moments, the things that bubble on this Pharoah Sanders record you described. Right then I was thinking about a gig I saw, I'll come back to that, a long time ago with Joshua Redman.
Mm-hmm.
But what came to mind, because that movie, my friend's film, was in my sort of brain this week, was the experience of when I used to go out on my dad's boat as a family when we were kids, or I'd go fishing with him. You would be out. It's great when you're a kid going fishing with your dad in an old wooden boat, the boat that was belonged to his granddad, and it's a whole thing, and you're trusted with things. It's like jobs to carry stuff, and maybe you get to row for a minute even though you're not strong enough. And, kid sort of growing up stuff. But there's a point when you're out on the lake, like my dad fishes for real, and there's a point when you're out on the lake as a kid, it's like I'm done. Like I want to go home now and play with ball with my friends. And there's real boredom. And then you zone out on a boat, looking at in Ireland it's often grey, looking at the water, looking at the lake, and the endless variation, just the little white tops that sort of, come up, and that sort of zoned out naturalistic. It brought to mind what you said, Michael, about you captured this idea of a naturalism, the sort of variation that is nature. When you're looking at that water, or when you sit and really look at a tree. I did it the other day on one of my walks. I just stopped and looked at a tree for like a minute. I was like, Jesus Christ, this is extraordinary. Like this tree, one of the many trees on the hike that we did, Michael, before you left, any one of those trees, if you stop and look at it for a minute, just 1 minute, and really look at it, what it is, where it came from, where it's going, and how 1,000 leaves are moving and reflecting and making tiny noises. If you stop and just listen to it, it's like that, but that endless variety, there isn't, you could watch that tree until the day you die and you'd never see the same pattern of light or hear the same pattern of sound, So anyway, that's a lot of what was in my mind. The Joshua Redman story, when I used to have the record store with my brother in Cork, in Ireland, the city has a famous jazz festival, and we used to get, our store was on a kind of a janky street in the city, just on the bad side of the tracks. But opposite us was the hotel where there was the center of the jazz festival. So we would get a real uptick in business every year, but we would get tickets to go to the big shows. And I was, early 20s at that point. And Joshua Redman, the sax player, was doing I'm not going to say the word saxophonist again.
That was hilarious. Apparently. That wasn't intentional?
What is
saxophonist?
No, it's saxophonist where I come from.
Wow, that's hilarious. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I am one, so I'm going to just take ownership on the saxophonist.
Oh, sure. Yeah, you can be whatever
Sorry,
you
that's
want.
hilarious. Saxophonist.
But anyway,
I
Joshua
am
Redman
a saxophonist.
plays sax, but
I am a saxophonist.
John is holding out a sort of a script.
I am Dali, like in the Midnight in Paris movie, and he just asserts himself.
I'm open to correction on this one. I'm not attached to it. Yeah. Anyway, this dude who played sax, let's avoid the trigger word. It was in the Cork Opera House, not the Opera House, in another theatre, the Everyman Theatre, about 1,000-seater, not a particularly amazing sounding room. But he came out and started playing, and he started just doing, I'd never experienced like a really high level sax player doing the crazy guttural things that a sax can do, the full extent of crazy, possible.
Yeah.
And it was like, just like being on the boat with my dad, it went way past what was comfortable. He just kept going with these increasingly dissonant, guttural sounds.
Yeah.
Until, it was like, this is interesting. And then it was like, this is a lot. And it was like, this is intense. And then it just got like really giddy. Like where you're just like, like he's just fucking with us.
Freeing,
and it was freeing. And I was kind of just like looking at the tree, I was getting bounced around in these crazy sounds. And like he had me basically. So that when you describe the sound of the, all my brothers and sisters played wind instruments. My brother's a sax player, and my sisters played clarinet and oboe and stuff. So that sound is very familiar from home. But when you described that, it brought me back to that gig, that moment where you're just like, fuck, this thing is wild.
Yeah, I mean, it's
unencumbered.
Yeah, unencumbered.
Yeah.
I mean,
there we go. We keep coming back to these. I saw Michael posted on the thread a drawing of the words.
Oh, cool.
I have you posted that online, Michael?
Yeah, the
it's beautiful.
episode group chat gets to have it.
Can we post it on our feed? It's gorgeous.
Cool.
I want to frame that.
I think it's helpful. I think it's helpful to have some sort of vocabulary to point to.
What are the nutrients?
Yeah, to talk about what's possible.
What are the dimensions?
I mean, not that I think that this matters at all, but it clearly matters to some degree. But Pitchfork gave the album that I'm talking about a 9, which, you know, they probably gave Justin Bieber a 3. Not that it matters, because Justin Bieber will stream and have way more success than this album will on a grand scale. But there's something dangerous and surprising about this that lets music lovers, and hopefully someone left at Pitchfork is a music fan, go, wow, tip of the hat to you. Never heard anything like that. It's truly musical. It's truly unencumbered, and it's interesting. And it's
surprising.
And it's the London Philharmonic.
I mean, it's the London Philharmonic.
Come on.
It's out of this world. I haven't listened on speakers yet. I'm afraid to, because I don't want to get disconnected from the mixes, because I don't actually like I don't like the panning. It actually sounds like orchestra panning. Like the violins are like just to the left of the conductor, and I'm like, cool. This is 2021. Could we get it a little wider? Like, can we take up a little bit more space with the orchestra? I don't need it to sound like I'm in the opera house or in the symphony hall completely.
Like I'm sat halfway back.
Yeah, like the bowed basses are to the right without the right amount of low end. You know, they're off to the side of the stage, when they should be, to me could be richer and take up the mono space. You know, so I think there's some missed opportunities sonically that, like, if they knew who I was, which I'm sure none of them do, I think I would be the man for the job in a sense, because I have mixed classical music and jazz and synthetic space agey music. So I feel qualified to make these comments, but I haven't listened on speakers, so I don't know what it sounds like. But I get tears, and so when I was starting to talk about this album, you get to movement 6, and it's full on Mahler meets Debussy meets I don't know, the synth. I don't even want to say anybody. I don't know. Someone that's beautiful, maybe Tame Impala without drums. You know, like some sort of beautiful long pad. Like it's something that you've heard but haven't heard, but the full-on Mahler just makes you start crying, right? There's just this, you can't avoid the intent that's in there harmonically speaking, right? So when I wanted to bring this up earlier is when we're talking about words, and, you know, there's language and there's music as a language, with words and without words. And I don't know what the composer was feeling at the moment there, but there is divine sadness. It's devastating in that moment. And how to create that without words is something that isn't really attempted, I guess. I mean, I haven't mixed an instrumental record in probably my whole career, I would say, unless I made it, because I make instrumental music because no one ever sings on them because I'm not a producer anymore. But that ability to emote through music alone and no word, it's pretty profound.
It's a
huge
poetry in music too. Music that gets past your defenses.
Oh yeah, well, it's again, it's the same thing. It's music as language for the stuff we can't communicate otherwise.
There's the same. You know, there's a grammar in classical architecture too that's similar.
Yes.
You know, I think like conserving what's so great about things that have been discovered and invented, you know, maybe a long time ago, it's sort of like a thing people don't talk about. And when I think about, these traditional folk songs or what you can do with an orchestra to make people feel things good. And even when you make people feel bad or sad or whatever,
tension, uneasy,
it somehow makes you feel better anyway.
Well, it makes you feel less alone.
Yeah, you're connected, right? Yeah. It does that human connection thing we always talk about either way. But we've all lived through a conservative movement in food. So when I was a kid, the supermarket was a much more denatured place. People no longer tolerate the rubber ball cherry tomatoes that were, on the shelves when I was a kid. Now there's a thing called Whole Foods, and it wasn't like that in the 80s. People are demanding, even people making science fiction food are using marketing terms like all natural and all this sort of thing to sell their stuff. So this is a general cultural trend in the States and across the world to some extent. So we've already witnessed what it looks like to roll things back, and it got me curious about can there be a conservative movement in music? What does that even look like?
Yeah, what does it look like?
And yeah, when you ask that question, it's like not throwback, not retro.
No.
Not referential.
No. Like demanding nutrients, demanding nutritious music.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I think that's a nice, solid, open question too. Like I don't know. I don't understand how it could.
I'd personally love to hear an artist and or producer kind of go through this list with us and give their feedback in terms of where they feel like they can make movement in any of these attributes, on any of these attributes. Because I think like removed from the context of like modern music making in 2021 on the highest level, it's hard for me to say how someone could implement any of these, but I'm really interested, like even a panel, just a bunch of people making music right now, kind of how they would even imagine,
I think
working with these.
I think we get Tyler on. Ask Tyler about that.
Yeah,
he's a good one.
One of the things I hope the podcast can do is by talking to a winemaker and an architect and an author and a surgeon, that we can get people excited about the possibility within music again. I think a lot of people are not having these kinds of conversations, and I'm not implying in any way that we're smarter or whatever. We're just asking the questions. But I don't know that the ideas will come from, I don't know that I would bet on 5 modern, busy record makers being the source of the way out of this sort of morass.
The reason why I bring Tyler into the conversation and say that he's the one to talk to about it is because the success he's had with Harry Styles, the records sound nothing like the other ones, and there was a resemblance of what we're discussing here in that music, because the artist is there the entire time and has something to say, and then being sculpted and crafted with a team that is inclusive. Anyway, I think that there's something, but I agree with you completely that having the cross discipline conversation is it's about time we do that too.
Yeah, I want to hear from the record company's point of view.
Yeah, I was going to say these are A&R questions, and we get Nate on and people on. And how do we? Yeah, I'd like their point of view on this too. Managers, like artist developers.
I've found with these Instagram lives I do on Wednesdays, having kind of a list of topics that I keep going back to and hearing different takes, like just it grounds the conversation. It obviously allows it to go anywhere, but it like is a funnel for sort of these ideas. And we've been talking about what it means to make, we could say timeless music, to use the term John mentioned, but like for a while we've been talking about this, where the state of music, where it could be, where we would like it to be. And I think, having some of these points just to hear why, like from an A&R point of view, why this doesn't happen, you know, or why they think it does. What does it look like to someone in it? But then also, to your point, Rory, I think outside of it as well, because what is timeless food or, you know, timeless neurosurgery? I don't know. Yeah, I don't-
I'll tell you, leeks
Yeah.
are a timeless food.
Yeah.
Fire is a timeless vessel.
Right.
Yeah.
You know,
for sure.
implement
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
flavor.
yeah.
Yeah.
I guess the food reference wasn't the right one.
No, it
because,
is.
We know
It's
that one.
where-
We know that
Interesting.
one more than others.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
you know
think
what
it.
I mean? But-
I think it
yeah.
is. Where were we? Somewhere recently. Who was it? It was one. It was me and you, Spider, or me and you, John. We were eating somewhere, and I just made the point that we could have been any time in history. Where it wasn't at Alex's place. There was. We were
yeah.
eating meat, and we had wine
Yeah. Maybe it was at your house.
at and a fire, and
It's
it
at
was
your house.
with you, Michael, maybe. And we were eating some meat. We had wine, and we were near the fire, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Basically, the setting was essentially timeless.
Yeah.
It was like we could be three dudes anywhere in the last couple of thousand years, 5,000 years,
Was
10,000 years.
it on the retreat, sitting around the fire, like slamming rocks and
But we
warming
weren't
our
eating
hands with
outside.
It might have been. It was anyway. It was just
Yeah.
one of those moments. But that food really has that ability to sort of ground you. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah, me.
I've been handed my ass by meals. We've talked about it in other countries, particularly where you get this lightning bolt of connection to. I don't know why I feel more at home in France than I do in Ireland. It's like a really strange thing, right? Who knows why? What part of my genetic makeup is from there or whatever, you know? Like Mirabelle's question the other day. She was worried about having a big nose. Like me, I texted you guys.
Yeah.
Dad, I
So
loved you.
good.
I loved you, but I gonna have big nose. Does what she said? Does everybody get big nose?
Yeah, that's what you
She was-
texted.
yeah.
She's worried she's gonna.
Something. Well, I have two things I want to say. I had an image that came to mind earlier about, and I haven't even thought about it. I'm just going to say it, see if there's anything in it. But how, you know, when we look at a pretty flower or a pretty plant, could be whatever, a cactus or whatever. For the flower or the plant to grow, it's got to be in a pot, and the pot has to have soil, and the soil has to be kind of healthy, and you have to water it. It needs sunlight. But we focus on the output. We focus on, you know, nobody talks about pots, you know. They're not the theme. Nobody, I mean, yeah, sure, in a gardening magazine or a gardening show, people are talking about, but in the general thing, it's like beautiful flowers. Nobody comes in to your house and dips their hand in your soil and rubs it, smells and goes, fucking nice soil, bro. Like they're looking at the pretty orchid, right? So I'm thinking about that in music. Like we're not focused on where these things come from, what they need. You know, the context. We're sort of like all about the pretty orchid, and we're not paying attention to the stuff that without these things just don't happen. These expressions. I don't know what that is. That's just an image. Michael, I wanted to ask you about this timelessness phrase. And get outside of music for a minute. And I don't necessarily mean take it to design, but maybe. But like,
I had somewhere I wanted to take it.
yeah, there.
But I would
then.
love to hear your question.
Yeah, no. I want a perspective on timelessness because I think it's timelessness is another word that I think is very cheap right now. It's been
Yeah.
cheapened. It's not a cheap word or a cheap concept, but it has been cheapened by the culture, you know,
Yeah.
or where this moment we're in. So I wanted to see what your take on it outside of music was.
Yeah, I wrote on my iPad referencing the flattening of words conversation we've already had and
Yes.
we've had many times. I think referencing People Skills, the book that I've been reading, it's sort of a door closing word, right? It's like there's a lot that people encode into it, or sometimes there's a lot that can be decoded from it and encoded into it, and it's not clear what is coming from either side, like what people are encoding into the word timelessness in a session and what people are decoding from that. I feel like because of that, the word loses a lot of purpose and function in a room. Whereas I think the list we kind of developed tonight gets at what would make something transcend. And I feel like it's hard for me to speak on the word timelessness because I don't know what word we're actually talking about. Like timelessness might just be cool to someone. It might be as deep as the word cool is deep, you know, like
or just retro or just throwback.
Yeah, like I don't know which version of the word we're really talking about. And I don't mean even by the dictionary versions. I mean like individual versions. I think there's like, you know, any word you could say and you could decode it differently than I encoded it. But this is one that like cool, like best, like whatever, you know, it doesn't, it's losing its potency.
Yeah, it seems
and
very
also I don't know
general.
if it's aspirational. I don't think like yeah, aspiring like for someone to give a shit in the future, cool, yeah. But like that's probably where it ends, like I would say, because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So how could you say it's going to be timeless? I think what you can do is like anything, kind of build that soil, like set the song up for the ability to connect across multiple levels, or the work to connect.
Then you have to
or
exist
whatever.
in multiple levels.
Yeah,
You have to understand history in order to do it,
exactly.
or to have more opportunity for it to emerge.
Yeah.
Again, it's like an idea comes, and I could say, oh, that's a timeless. That's a timeless thing. I like that. It's a very general statement about one. It's not easily dated. It's like, oh, that's very fucking Motown and nothing else, right? Very narrowly dated. Oh, that is super fucking 1979.
Gated snare, we know when it comes from.
Yeah, they're very dated. Now, that's not to say a gated snare can't be part of a timeless. A timeless. There are 80s productions that are still fascinating, and you know you can tell when they were made, but they reveal a deeper universal truth.
Yeah, Michael really nailed it for me with saying it's a closed door word. It's a closing door.
It's a new phrase to me. I like that a lot.
A closing door word, because it leaves
Door
more.
closing.
Yeah, either one.
yeah.
Yeah, either one.
But any word that's misused is that.
Yeah, because it lends more opportunity to negating the idea than it does opening up the possibility of more ideas.
Because it's not specific enough?
Yeah, it's nothing.
What do
it
you
actually
mean?
has no weight.
Transcending
It's
time
difficult
is a
to
super
decode.
important concept.
Of course.
Yeah.
No, of course.
Well, yeah, you're mixing Michael. Yeah, Michael said the word transcend, and I was like, oh, that's so much better.
Yes, so much
But
better.
what Michael didn't say is that timeless or timelessness is meaningless or useless. It's just that the word means so many different things to that it's effectively not a functional word.
But I'm tying it into the conversation of flattening of words that we're talking about, where you say goat to all 6 people in the room. Who's the goat? You say timeless to every sound on the record. What's timeless about it? It doesn't mean nothing. Like obviously the word means exponential amounts, but the way people are using it cheaply means they don't know what it means. Therefore, it isn't encoded with meaning when said in the room, is kind of what I'm gathering from Michael's closed door, or door closing, or closing of the door.
But I don't think we can let ignorance close the door on words for us.
I agree.
Yes.
I agree.
Yeah. So I think like
that's why I wanted to talk about it today, because I felt like we were shying around this word and mentioning it, but it's a super important word in our world right now.
yeah.
Well, okay, can I step in there for a second? Because I'm not trying to close the door on the word via ignorance. I'm saying
No, of course not.
to extract it from someone, the odds of finding very little at the end of that extraction process are higher, it seems. If we're talking about flattening of words, what we're talking about is we're flattening the encoded meaning to mean 1 to 0 things when a word is said. And so I think that's what I was talking about the word. It's not like, even when you said, oh, that's timeless, I like it, you followed it by saying, I like the song. And it's like, did you say timeless? I'll just use you for an example. Like, if you said that in a room, that could mean you just like the song. It could also mean something different, and it could mean layers of other things.
Hold on, because my context was different, because when I was using the word, it was to describe the timelessness of my experience from the record. So I was asking the question and arguing, could that be a form of timelessness in music where my time is irrelevant then?
Your word is better. John had a transcendent experience.
Yeah. Yes.
He was in the neighborhood, but he wasn't.
Exactly. It's transcendent experience.
I was on the walk looking at the tree.
Yes.
I was on a piece of ground, but I wasn't.
But does a timeless piece of music or a timeless piece of art offer up a transcendent experience by default? Is that what?
No.
I don't know. I'm asking. I don't know.
Yes.
It can. It can. Does it?
Yeah.
No.
It
I
might.
don't think it, does it need to, you're saying?
No.
Or
That's
can
what timeless means. It transcends a time. It transcends time.
Mm-hmm.
It transcends time, but does it transcend
the timeless thing is another
listener?
aspect of the truth theme that I've been exploring.
It's not absence of time.
This fundamental sort of thing that it's just...
It's another way of saying universal. It's a dimension of universality.
Yeah,
I would
an
say.
expression of something bigger. You know, and this is, if you were religious, this is where
cultureless, timeless.
It would go into probably into that. You know, people would say, religious people might say that's God speaking through the music, or a kind of a through nature, or these moments are connected by that godliness. You know, these experiences rather, these transcendences.
I guess by bringing it up, I would want to challenge the overuse of the word.
We don't overuse it.
No, I know. No. Listenership.
Well,
no. I don't think I've ever used it on the podcast.
Yeah.
It's just
depending who you're speaking to. If you're talking to a Rob Moose or an Egon, who's someone I haven't met that you guys have met, that clearly fucking knows music. Right, clearly from just following the dude, versus a 17-year-old beat maker, and someone uses the word timeless or timelessness or transcendent. You rate the chances of
you can gauge the embodiment of the timelessness that this person holds.
The grasp on what timelessness means.
This is true of any word. I mean, this is
just
ignorance.
Nobody's defending ignorance here. I think what Michael point, as I understand it, is you're being pragmatic about if the goal. Michael is. I know I'm talking for you, Michael, but if the outcome is to make a great record, then we need a way of moving through the world. And Michael is saying throwing out the word timeless might not be useful in the session. So let's think about now. Nobody is saying,
but that word is no different to any other word.
Well,
actually, that's not actually what I'm saying.
Okay,
so you can use the word. I think what's more important, and what I would challenge people to do, is to actively decode that word as a group, because part of what we talked about being really important to this naturalistic or intent-filled, intent-rich music is that it's communal, and communities have shared language. But if you're in a room and someone uses a word that its meaning is not your meaning, then you're not communal, because you have words that don't share the same meaning. We've gotten into this situation as a group, right? Where I threw out a word, you guys didn't understand it. It took us a while to resolve the word, and then it became a word in our group. I think, and then it becomes a tool. But prior to that, it's just a word that's causing trouble. And I think timelessness can be a word that's causing trouble if you're not actively decoding it and showing the people in the room that they can encode it. They may have encoded it with meaning beyond just the word timelessness, like beyond just the emoji. They might actually mean natural or communal or the way I feel when I listen to Motown. There might be something richer beyond that word. I don't think there's anything wrong with any word. I think there's something wrong with how people hear and listen to the words, and if they actively decode the words or not. I think that's where it kind of stops. Like, you throw that out in a session, everyone's like, yeah, man, sure. Like, but what does that do for anyone?
Yes.
And I think that's the point.
That's what I'm pushing.
Yeah.
That's what I'm pushing up against. Exactly.
So let's take into consideration the social imperative. So, you know, after working on pop records for a long time with a lot of grown-ups, I worked with a band of, you know, a successful band. They weren't kids. They weren't old. And I was reintroduced to like a world of slang. It was like, oh yeah, there's like this whole way of talking, you know? And so in sessions I've noticed with different groups, there's like sort of social signaling built into the way they talk, and there can be the specificity of meaning will be sacrificed for the sort of affiliation or social connection. And you can easily see how a word like timeless would just be like one of those words that we all throw around. It just means positive. It's not a positive term. It's just sort of moving things forward. Michael's description of like 4 people in a session, 3-4 people in a session, and like what we do here at the table, to me is exactly the same. It's how do we work together to bring greater clarity to our understanding, greater clarity to the conversation, greater clarity to the understanding, and then more power to the work as a consequence. And I think like whatever the word, whatever the language being used, making a deliberate attempt to refine language to make your creative language more specific, to have a higher resolution vocabulary around the creative process, to me has always been really important to getting better. It's like if I can be more specific about the emotional intent of this pre-chorus, everybody downstream's going to get it and lean into it. Like if I want this first pre-chorus here to be asking a difficult question, like I want to feel that. You know, I want it, despondence as opposed to misery. You know what I mean? Like finding a finer grain way of speaking about the work will make it richer. I love this word, richer. It makes your experience of awe and it's an aspect of transcendence. It's like when the richness just becomes overwhelming.
Yes.
You know?
And
exactly.
And by getting everybody on the same page, you truly unlock the power of 4 or 6 or 8.
Yeah, as much as any 4 can be on the same page.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I mean, aligning the intent of art, you know, I think it's great to use words for social signaling. Like, I think that's a great thing. Of course, people bonding together is great. For the right reasons, but to make a deliberate effort to go beyond that, I think is something maybe people aren't thinking about. Where I think Michael's thing could be really valuable to people who are trying to make evergreen copyrights. You know?
Yeah, go, Michael.
I've been talking about this book a lot. I'm halfway through it now. It's pretty dense, but it really is changing how I view this weekly conversation, how I engage with the world, and a lot of that is what you just said. And I like how you were able to kind of relate what I was thinking from the book into more into the tone of this conversation and for artists, but. Yeah, it's been helping me identify moments to listen in and how to listen in really intently and how to extract and present and move a conversation forward, though it doesn't seem like the methods would be the ones that move the conversation forward. Sort of like how we're saying doing all of this stuff might not seem like it will make a hit, but it's sort of the soil that produces rich agriculture. I think this idea of paraphrasing is something they mention. And you just said, I don't know why I'm speaking for Michael. I would say that you were attempting to paraphrase what I said to Spider. And it ended up not being a correct paraphrase, but it allowed me to then respond like, oh, okay, there was something that I said that he took and decoded and is now encoding into a new thing that's being sent across the table that is incorrect. And it's like, it speaks to why you would interrupt. Like, I don't want you to keep sending that signal because it's wrong, right? Mm-hmm. Not because I just don't want you to send it, just for ego or something. You know what I mean? I don't know. Just been having these sort of realizations while reading the book about all this stuff. And I think it speaks directly to music and design because all these things are just signals being sent forward, you know? And so if you can perfect communication skills, like to think that you're working in music and not working in the communications field is just stupid, you know? Like that's what you're doing ultimately, whether you want to use the word or not, or the, the college degree or not, like that, which is what they would call a communications degree or whatever. But you're using communication; that is their primary mode. And so, as I'm reading about this, it's connecting to so many things we've been talking about. Whether it's a dialogue here, whether it's a piece of art communicating with the world, whether it's people in a room communicating to encode a piece of art that then communicates. I don't know. It's been really good.
That we had you guys, you were in New York, and Spider, you were at jury duty, but we had our weekly sync last week, and I asked, Michael and I had a long talk after the meeting about the book and about this concept, but I asked a question that in my mind was really clear. You know, using frameworks that I had sort of in my brain, I asked a question, I think, of Dylan about something.
What do you think about the podcast? That's what you said.
It was... Yeah, it was more than that. It was a longer question than that. Oh,
it was like four more words.
Anyway, it was a question about where we're headed with something. And Michael just stopped and said, like, what are you getting at with this question? Because it's like, he basically saw that I had asked this question and in my mind was specific. When it came out of my face was incredibly vague. And he was about to watch Dylan give an answer that I probably would have been like, well, Dylan didn't really give a good answer. And it's like, well, no, you didn't ask a good question. So Michael stopped me, said, hey, what are you getting at here? What are you looking for? It's like, well, I want, Dylan has this perspective because of this, this, and this. I want his opinion on this thing. So we sharpened the question way up and Dylan came in with a great answer. And it took an extra maybe 30 seconds tops for Michael to stop me, say, that's vague. You're not being clear. Punch it up. I did. And then Dylan was able to give an answer. I would have accepted Dylan's vague answer to my vague question and kind of felt, and as you said, we would have been 3 minutes down the road and nothing achieved. Like, it would have been just like, that's a classic meeting. That's like every fucking meeting you ever had.
Exactly. I was like, I don't want to do that again. But what was interesting, though, is when I asked you the question, it wasn't you asked a bad question. It was, how can we set Dylan up to best answer the question or to best say and respond to whatever came out of your mouth, which was like, you just gave him 10 roads to go down. And whichever one he chooses, it's not going to cover all 10. So like maybe we just give him a lane and let him drive and do have a rich response, because that's what we really wanted anyway. Yeah, and that's what you had wanted. So
I think you have a very promising history as a couples therapist with that with that framing.
Thanks, dude.
It was very effective, and we had a great conversation after the call just about the book and about this way of sharpening language.
The book? Are we talking about people skills?
Yeah, yes. the book.
Kills people's.
It kills people. Yeah, it's you know how I am with books on this podcast. I'll come on and be super psyched about it. I realize I've always been that way. Like with work, I'll be reading a book and try to actively apply it like as much as I can in the moment. And this one just is applying. It's applicable to so many different places. Like my internal dialogue is communication, then external, and then this project is like literally a night in which we converse. So listen and speak and assert and interrupt and all those things. It's like, it's just connecting to so many things that I didn't think it would.
How long until you start book club?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know.
You got enough clubs for now?
Yeah, I have enough clubs.
This can be Michael's book club anytime he wants, because I find it really,
I
find it really useful.
Yeah,
I don't have time to read anywhere near as much as I want, and I have great books sitting unread at home.
Yeah, there's so many.
Like, you go further than reading them. You're making notes and you're trying to understand, integrate, explain, share.
Yes.
Share in multiple modes. So I get hit with the quote on Instagram, but then you bring it up in our conversation.
Yeah.
And that really helps
communal
me.
Integration.
It really helps me, you know. So this can be book club anytime you want. It's a big, I think it's a big thing that you bring to the table, you know.
I can't read, so I'll be YouTube club.
Something Jocko said on the interview the other day about books was like, he was talking about a chess player and how the chess player, though younger, the older chess players said that he had an advantage over him. And Jocko thought it was just his youth and his energy. And he was like, no, he has the ability to take from your book everything you learned over 30 years and in 10 hours learn as much of that as he possibly can. And so it's like, books are these artifacts that are sent, I guess, forward in time for people to read and then apply, taking whatever it is that they knew at the time and wrote into the book, and whatever you know at the current time, integrate that and put that forward, and it kind of compounds. And I think that, to me, is really what is magical about it's not a good word, because
it is kind of
what's the
magical.
code there?
It is magical.
I think that is magic.
It's what I think is beautiful about reading and its impact, because it's a contribution to history ultimately, and as are you, and so you're using history to give back.
The human project.
Standing on the shoulders of giants. I mean, in this case, they were talking about Garry Kasparov, some 11-year-old kid who fucking beat him.
Amazing. Seth Godin always talks about the ratcheting effect. You know, that sort of just cranking it up, and sort of that we can build on these previous experiences.
But if you don't know if you don't know history, like, that's where I feel like a lot of my life I've been reinventing things, like connecting dots and putting ideas together that someone did 1,000 years ago, and I just was never educated in a classical education, so I don't have this repertoire of history, of past work to build on. And I think so many people are reinventing all the time when they don't need to. You know, it's sort of a great tragedy of our education system, or our inability to educate people on what would be useful.
Yeah, for sure.
We are standing on shoulders of giants in so many ways. The young women in Georgia singing very old songs is another version of this. You know, they're doing their little arrangement, their little way of interpreting the songs, their little innovation, their little part of the evolution of these songs. And there'll be more generations behind them that are influenced by them, primarily, probably.
We talked about did we talk about it on mic or at dinner? It was at dinner when we were talking about the girls in Georgia, about Irish traditional music. So which I played a bunch of, folk music. You were mentioning it earlier, John, when I was playing the guitar. I played a bunch of it and worked with, Ireland is famous for its traditional music. And if you in the history of Irish traditional music, I have played with or recorded Hendrix, Fleetwood Mac, like all of the giants who have lived in the same time as me, I've worked with. Live shows a bunch, playing, recording in their houses, because it's a small country. So if you do what I do, you end up coming across these people a lot. So I have a big insight into this world. But what we were talking about at dinner is that Irish music was this handed down from generation to generation for hundreds of years, these melodies that survived or didn't. Simple melody, very little harmony, Everything was sort of doubled, tripled. 2 fiddle players or 3 fiddle players would play the same line. There would be little ornamentations, and maybe they would trade off. But it was basically very simple. But Irish music was changing slowly over time, and there was classical music influences coming in, via the English in Ireland and whatever. But basically, at some point, a bunch of Irish players emigrated to the US, and in the early 1900s, 78 records came back from the US of those players. So those players went to Ireland, went to the US, and instead of playing Irish house parties, there's a very particular example that I have in mind. This guy was a painter by day, but he was a rock star fiddle player by night. So he would play to thousands of people in these halls in New York, and recorded these records that were kind of informed by these live, high energy, high nutrition experiences for the Irish immigrant in New York, right? At a time when your Irishness was really
homesick,
and also no Skype, no FaceTime.
And Irishness was alienating.
Irishness put you in a lane. It wasn't maybe what it is now. So these people are at this experience that's intense, and that intensity found its way into the music. He recorded records that came back to Ireland,
right.
And that informed the culture here and changed music in Ireland. So there was I'm here in the States. Yeah. Went back to Ireland and changed music forever. So there was this kind of injection of this
reverberation,
immigrant energy that was captured through the players and their 78s and came back and changed Irish music and sort of basically gave it this massive shot in the arm of tempo and intensity and kind of when you hear Irish recordings made in Ireland in that period and the recordings of Irish music made in America in the same period, there's a big difference. And you see the DNA of modern Irish traditional music in the American recordings, so that echo came back. But anyway, I don't know why I'm remembering that. We were talking about it at dinner. There was a reason I went off on that tangent, but
about building on things, the same way.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Why it came to mind is these. Michael often uses the word artifact. These videos will be watched by Georgian kids in the future, and they will learn the songs from the video, from the artifact, rather than maybe directly from their grandma.
And the same way, that's the way memory works. This is our collective memory is going to work the same way our actual memory works.
Think about the history of humanity. People in Georgia, let's say, for example, I know almost nothing about Georgian history, right? So let's imagine that people were born in a village, lived near their grandparents, and it was a local. There was no reason to go far away. And we think of the modern world where Google must have an office in Georgia, and the dad from the village goes to work for Google because he got a good education and takes his kids with him. So they're not near his grandfather anymore to learn the songs. The kid will learn the song off YouTube. So these girls are part of the transmission of this culture. These YouTube videos are part of the story, and what that will do, remains to be seen. But it's fascinating to me, to a musicologist, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's something fascinating to me is to take a form and to innovate on it in so much as to update it, but not to change it fundamentally. I think this has been, until maybe the industrial age, this is sort of the way everything worked. Things were done a certain way, and then you learned a bit, and then you just did do a little better. Little by little, things evolve. My question, one of the things I wrote down trying to understand this phenomenon of Trio Mondoli is, how do you discern innovation from decay? Right? How can you tell if something is falling apart or if it's getting better? If it's architecture or music or painting or whatever it is. There are complaints about modern architecture. That's sort of an ongoing problem. a lot of buildings are built in cities, civic buildings that people end up not liking. They don't want to spend time there. These buildings can't be used for anything else. Is that, there are certain innovations in modern architecture. Obviously, there are masterpieces, but is something being lost that people need, right? Things that make people feel like they belong. Did the classicists have something right? Even the neoclassicists who built Washington, D.C. and a lot of buildings in the United States. Were they right to bring that classicist grammar forward? And I wonder, it's probably even harder to look at music this way, but I think without an understanding of history and where things come from and some idea of the through line and the trends, like the way the trends are going, you can't have a judgment. Or innovation, decay could look like innovation if you're looking at a short time scale and not a longer one. It's just an interesting question. How can you tell? What do you need?
I think it's a great question. Yeah. And yeah.
I'm kind of thinking about nature in this regard. Like, there's times where trees die completely. They completely decay, right? And then that environment changes and is able to regrow new things as a result of it. So I had a question of why is that important to know? Not saying that I have a stance on this, because I don't, but why is it important to know which part of it is it? Is it as a means of preventative?
It is preventative. Yeah. Part of the question in architecture, maybe, I'm sort of looking for the parallel in other in arts and things, but music, dance, who knows? But in architecture, there are consequences to social cohesion, like feeling like you live somewhere worth protecting, morale, optimism about, cynicism at a city level, cynicism at a state level, cynicism at a national level is an aspect of societal collapse, right? So there are stakes involved. And city planning, talk to city planners like Amanda, what's her name, who did the High Line in New York. This is what their whole framework is. It's about, thriving cities, thriving individuals and thriving cities. And so there it's, we might have had the biggest names in architecture come through and design a bunch of things, but if the structures are inhibiting what we as city planners define, or urban planners, as the health of a population, and I think it matters quite a bit. Music, we know, it's a kind of essential force of nature. We can't explain why we need it, but we do. We know we do. What does it mean if modern singers don't smile? What does it mean that what does that do to society? What does that do to the development of young people if just people who sing songs don't smile? Is that decay or is that an innovation? I don't know.
I'm thinking of the word that, talking about how we use language. A word that we've used at different points in conversations we've had offline and on is being humbled by stuff in your life. Truly humbled, brought to your knees by life experience, by trauma or illness or death or car crashes or depression or whatever. But I wonder, a good question for our audience, I guess, to ask themselves is, how often are you truly humbled by art regardless of the discipline. You know, poetry, music, how often does it break you down? You know, get past your defenses. I remember, I may have talked about it on mic, the first time I went to the Getty Museum, I would not consider myself to be hip to architecture. Like there are arts, dance, you know, it's like moving furniture around a stage for me. It almost never means anything to me. I watch great dancers. Apparently, if I go and if you see dance in real life, it's more powerful. And, you know, I'm sure if I saw a ballet, it would mean something. But generally, I can watch dance and it means nothing, right? Mm-hmm. And architecture, I would have considered that to be a lot like that for me until the first time I went to the Getty and had my ass handed to me by architecture and what it could do to move things around inside my body. Like, why does it feel like my organs are being rearranged? And when I round this corner, what is it about the way the light is coming, you know, on my shoulders now against this vista? Like the architect was playing with me and I was feeling all these feelings unprovoked. I was being humbled by the architecture and the grounds and the scale and the, you know, that's what churches were designed to do, obviously, back in the day. But I think that when you think about meaning in life, which is a theme that you often reference, Spider, like family, community, and these moments of either being humbled or transcending, losing track of time, being connected deeply to a place or a person's experience, that's what we're living for, right? And I don't know that we're all getting enough of them. I think we're all trying to do more and more of it, and we're excited to share them, and excited to understand them. But I don't know that a lot of people in modern life are getting enough of it.
Not even sure they're seeking them out.
Well, yeah, that's where
because I am, and it's hard to find.
Yeah, that's what I was. You know, I struggle with the language of this to not sound like you're judging people.
Of course
but
not.
It's like we've had
There's
over
no
and over
incentive
again.
to search.
A very clear example for us is great sound, truly jaw-dropping sound, where your head is spinning and you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, we know it's possible.
We've heard it.
Yeah, your guts are turned inside out.
But the first time I heard it, I had to go to London to find it. I'd never heard it ever once in Ireland.
Yeah.
It was a mastering room in London. It was the first time, like, what the fuck is going on with this? Right? And then it's been leveled up.
Yeah.
You know, I remember a specific experience in Metropolis at London with Maurice, and then different the first time in one of Thomas's rooms. And like, you have these different moments where your sense of what's possible, you know, the world has a glass ceiling. That phrase is another one that has meaning. But
so does my Tesla.
Yeah, exactly. But the world has a glass ceiling, and you don't know it until it's been broken, and you get to the next level. And we get to see people. We get to bring people through that a lot. It's very common for Spider and I to be in the room or to have helped someone get to the best thing they've ever heard.
Yeah.
It's not as good as the best thing I've ever heard, or probably the best thing Spider's ever heard. But in that room on that day, it's the best thing they've ever heard. And they've never heard their songs that way, or they've never heard
their favorite songs.
Or Billie Holiday or Joni or fucking, you know, whatever we're hip to at the moment, at that moment. So we have an experience of like humbling people, or not. We're not humbling them. We're enabling the humbling. We're enabling the leveling up of experience. And, you know, you think about every artistic discipline is corruptible. We talked about slam poetry recently, and you know, my experience of some of this raw poetry is that it's very self-serving,
self-indulgent,
self-serving, you know, which is something I'm aware of even in this conversation, right? In art, obviously you have the kind of absurdity of the gallery system and the numbers that are attached to works from people like Jeff Koons or fucking Damien Hirst or whatever, right? These kind of abstraction of value and meaning, you know.
Well, it's a social, it's more of a social thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But again, it's a pull away from this humbling, you know, from this meaning, from this thing. And then I think every music we've explored at length, what the challenges are. And I'm sure we could go through all of the arts.
Yeah.
And find the pressures that are on it to away from this connected, humbling, leveled up experience, you know. So I don't know what I'm saying really is just a plea for people to really, I'm asking the question with our feedback in mind. We should say that, Michael, you did a survey. Do you want to tell what it is so that we can put it in context? Or is it even relevant?
I don't know.
I'll tell you why I'm thinking of it is the people who were saying that they were 23 and that the way we're thinking or talking is helping them. And I'm like, to that person, because all I saw was nameless, you know, it's like, go get more of this. This thing is good for you, you know, find it where you can. And maybe don't judge your necessary daily minimum. What is it that's on the vitamin bottles by what your friends are getting? You know what I mean? What is it that's called on it?
Daily allowance or something.
Recommended minimum or whatever.
Yeah.
Don't look around you at your four buddies and say, well, they're getting one artistic moment a month, so that's good for me. You know, I guess I'm speaking to that 23-year-old, whoever that is. But anyway, if you want to talk about the survey, do, or if not, go anywhere else. Yeah.
Well, other than just thanking everyone that submitted, I mean, we have 30 entries, I think, right now, which is double than we had this morning. So it's great to see the community giving us this feedback. All I really asked were what they thought, how they explain it to the world, if they have any feedback for us, any notable episodes. I just want to get a sense of really like what people's perception of this is and what value this plays in society. I mean, we talk about this all the time about in this conversation talking about art and its effect on society, architecture and how it might affect human well-being. How can this podcast play a role in any degree of doing the same? And so it has been really useful for me to read these responses, which are all anonymous, which is kind of great. I have no idea other than John Graper's response, who wrote them. And it's, I like it for them to be anonymous, but also for us, because hopefully it allows them to express themselves fully about, you know, what we're doing. So other than saying thank you for doing it, it's been really valuable, and I've been trying to share one answer every day leading up until Friday with the group so we can kind of sit with them. But now we have more responses, so there's a lot to share. But yeah, it's great to see that a conversation like this can reframe people's day-to-day lives. It seems to be a common theme of these responses, and that's very inspirational for me to hear that. High stakes.
Me too. Yeah. Yeah, I'll walk with two podcast listeners this week hiking, you know, with Dan yesterday and Hector tomorrow, you know, and it's great.
I want to encourage people to listen to this music that we've been discussing. I made a playlist of some of my favorite Trio Mondoli songs, and Graham will put them in the show notes so you can check this out. Like 10 or 12 songs, sort of in an order. And just see what you think. See what you can gather from it, because, you know, as I go back, you know, it's like they get up, they seem to be early in the morning, walking through the village, at a mountain, at a lake, wherever they are in Georgia, and they take a little stroll and they sing a song. And it sounds so simple, but there's so much going on. And the music is, traditional Georgia music, so it may be a little bit unfamiliar, but maybe give a couple listens, let the sort of rhythm, the hooks sort of set in. I noticed that this music matured in my mind as I heard it a couple times, but I don't know, see what there is there for you. What kind of thing, what aspects of it can be leveraged in your work, or anything that inspires you about it. I just find it so rich. I wake up with this stuff in my head. It's in my mind all day, playing in the background. I'm completely obsessed with it right now. So have at it. I think it's worth spending a little bit of time.
Thanks for enriching our lives with this music, Spider.
Thanks, bro.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you guys know, but John Graber had a baby.
Yeah,
Yes.
I didn't know the
baby.
baby's name. I was going to reference Baby Graber, and those photos are just
Baby
adorable.
Graber.
Adorable.
Amazing.
Oh my God.
He was texting me all day. He's like, "This is insane." He's like, "This is the coolest thing ever."
It is the coolest thing ever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Congrats, John. I don't know boy or girl, and I don't know a name. Do you have any
Girl.
details?
Girl, and her name's hyphenated. May is the second.
I was going to make a hyphenated Graber joke. That's a funny first name, but yeah. Go. What is it? No, we don't have it.
My phone's dead.
John Graber.
Well,
It's John Graber is the first name.
well, it's a beautiful thing, John, and we are
Yeah.
super happy for you.
Congratulations to
and your
you and the
partner.
whole family.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, man.
huge, and those
It's
photos
amazing.
are incredible, and they're probably the only thing on Instagram worth looking at, aside from maybe Trio Mandalay.
Yeah.
It really is.
They're not too active on Instagram.
No, well, via you maybe a couple of posts from you. Will you stick 'em up?
Dustin Dutch to Digital posted them last week. That's
Yeah.
where I saw them.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if there's something, I guess we should say to listeners, if there's something that you have seen that is profound in this way, then we want to hear about it too. We want to sort of getting this feedback loop going of you guys bringing stuff to us that we can share. And we've, books or poems or stuff.
Yeah.
If there's something truly that moved you, that humbled you, that broke you down, that helped you transcend being downtown for 45 minutes or 47 minutes, to share it. And we'll check it out. All right. Peace out.
Yeah.
We are done, guys. See you next week, and thank you for being here.
Until next time.
Conversations is produced and mixed by Dylan Seals. The Conversations theme was performed and recorded by the Hazelrick Brothers.